Imagine this. You're lying in your bed, lost in the heat of the moment, when your door swings open. Your uncle stands there, eyes wide, frozen in shock. And yet, instead of feeling ashamed, you feel drawn to him. What if the person who's always been there for you is the one you've been waiting for? Stay with me, because this is a story of forbidden love, unexpected connections, and the courage to embrace what you truly feel. Are you ready? Let's dive in. The night my uncle walked in while I was in the middle of the act, something happened that I will never regret. It was the most exciting night of my life. My name is Alex, and this story unfolded during one of the quietest summers of my life. My Uncle David was staying with us for a few weeks, and while he was technically just my mom's older brother, there had always been something different about him. He wasn't like the other adults in our family. David carried himself with an ease that made people naturally gravitate toward him. He was warm, attentive, and full of life, with a laugh that could light up the room. But it wasn't just his personality that made him so captivating. He was strikingly handsome in his late 50s. He had the kind of rugged charm that came from years of hard work and a sense of confidence that didn't need to be overstated. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and his sharp jawline was often shadowed by a faint stubble. His eyes were deep and knowing, always seeming to hold a quiet understanding of the world. I'd always admired him, but this summer something shifted. Maybe it was because I was older now, no longer the awkward teenage nephew I used to be when he visited. Maybe it was the way he looked at me differently too, his eyes lingering just a second longer than necessary when we talked, as if he noticed things about me he hadn't before. Whatever it was, it left me feeling breathless. It began with small moments barely noticeable to anyone else, but impossible for me to ignore. Like the way his hand would brush against mine when we reached for something at the same time, sending a jolt through me, or the way his voice softened when he said my name, the syllables rolling off his tongue with an almost reverent tone. I started to notice everything about him, the way his shirts stretched across his shoulders, the faint scent of his cologne that lingered long after he left the room, the way his laugh seemed to settle into my chest and stay there. No one in my family knew yet that I was attracted to boys, and especially older men, and so my uncle did not know that either. But sometimes I felt as if he knew. One evening we sat on the back porch together watching the sunset. I had a book in my lap, though I wasn't reading it. My focus was entirely on him, the way he leaned back in his chair, relaxed but completely present. "You've been quiet today," he said, his voice breaking through my thoughts. His eyes met mine, and for a moment it felt like the rest of the world faded away. "I've just been thinking," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't trust myself to say more about what he asked, leaning forward slightly, his gaze searching mine. "Things, huh?" he said with a small smile, leaning back again. "Don't think too hard. It's summer. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself." His words were simple, but the way he said them felt like an invitation to let go of the tension I'd been carrying. I smiled back, but inside my heart was racing. Being around him felt like standing too close to the edge of something thrilling but dangerous. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. My thoughts wandered to the way he'd looked at me, the way his voice had wrapped around my name. I felt a warmth spread through me, an ache that was both thrilling and confusing. I tried to push it away, telling myself it was nothing, but the more I tried, the stronger it grew. The next day, I found myself seeking him out more than usual. I'd linger in the kitchen while he made coffee just to hear the low timbre of his voice as we chatted about nothing in particular. I'd sit a little closer to him on the couch during family movie nights, my heart pounding every time our arms brushed. And when he smiled at me, that easy, genuine smile that lit up his whole face, I felt like I could drown in it. There was one moment in particular that stood out. It was late afternoon, and I was sitting in the living room sketching in my notebook. David came in, a towel draped over his shoulders, his hair damp from shower. He was wearing a plain gray t-shirt and jeans, but on him, even his simplest clothes looked effortlessly good. "What are you working on?" he asked, nodding toward my sketchbook as he sat down on the couch beside me. Just doodling, I said, suddenly self-conscious. I closed the notebook, but he reached out and gently placed his hand over mine, stopping me. Don't hide it. I want to see, he said, his voice low and warm. Reluctantly, I opened the notebook again, turning it so he could see. He studied the drawing for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly, and then he looked at me with a smile. You're really talented, you know that, he said, his hand still resting over mine, and I was hyper-aware of the warmth of his touch. Thanks, I murmured, my voice barely audible. My pulse was racing, and I was sure he could hear it. His hand lingered for a moment longer before he pulled it away, but the imprint of his touch stayed with me long after he left the room. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my mind. The way he'd looked at me, the way his hand had felt against mine, it was all-consuming, but I didn't know what was still coming. Something that would change our relationship forever in a positive way. David's presence seemed to fill the house, even when he wasn't around. His laugh echoed in my mind. His touch lingered on my skin, and his gaze, seemed to follow me everywhere, even when he wasn't looking. I found myself looking for excuses to be near him, small moments that might seem insignificant to anyone else, but felt monumental to me. If he was in the kitchen, I'd suddenly remember I needed water. If he was reading on the porch, I'd bring out a book I wasn't actually planning to read. I wanted to be close to him, to feel the warmth of his presence. To bask in a way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, the house was quiet. My mom had gone to visit a friend in town, and David was in the backyard working on some project. He'd been fixing up the old shed behind the house. I could hear the rhythmic sound of his hammer striking wood through the open window. It was a comforting sound, steady and deliberate, much like him. I found myself watching him from the kitchen window, my breath catching as I took him in. He was wearing a sleeveless shirt, the fabric clinging to his chest and shoulders, and his arms flexed with each swing of the hammer. His hair was damp with sweat, and a faint sheen covered his skin, catching the sunlight. He looked incredible. I tore my gaze away, feeling a rush of heat flood my cheeks. What is wrong with me? He was my uncle. I shouldn't be feeling this way, shouldn't be thinking about him like this. But no matter how much I tried to push the thoughts away, they kept coming back, stronger and more insistent. I decided to bring him something to drink, hoping that a simple normal interaction would ground me. I filled a glass with cold water and stepped outside, the warm summer air wrapping around me like a blanket. He looked up as I approached, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Hey," he said, setting down his hammer and wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "Thought you might be thirsty," I said, holding out the glass. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Thanks," he said, taking the glass from me. His fingers brushed against mine, and even that small contact sent a jolt through me. He took a long drink, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed, and I found myself staring again, unable to look away. "You've been working hard," I said, trying to fill the silence. "It looks good," he smiled, glancing back at the shed. "It's coming along. It's nice to have a project to keep me busy." We stood there for a moment, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. I wanted to say something, anything, to keep the conversation going, but the words wouldn't come. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice gentle. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said quickly, too quickly. His brow furrowed, and he took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice soft, but there was something in it that made my heart race. "I'm fine," I said, looking away, but the truth was, I wasn't fine. I was a mess, torn between what I knew was right and the way he made me feel. He reached out his hand, brushing against my arm. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it sent a shiver through me. "You know you can talk to me, right?" he said. "About anything." I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted to tell him everything, to lay it all out there, but I couldn't. Instead, I forced a smile and said, "Thanks, David. I'll remember that." He smiled back, but there was a question in his eyes, one he didn't voice. I turned and walked back to the house, my heart pounding in my chest. Then the night came again, and I couldn't sleep as my mind was racing, playing every moment from the day, every look, every touch, every word. I felt like I was coming apart at the seams, torn between the overwhelming feelings I couldn't control and the knowledge that they were wrong. As the hours ticked by, I found myself giving in to the thoughts I've been trying so hard to suppress. I let my mind wander, imagining what it would feel like if he touched me, if he held me, if he looked at me the way I wanted him to. The thoughts were intoxicating, a heady mix of desire and longing that left me breathless. I reached for my phone, scrolling through social media in a desperate attempt to distract myself, but it was no use. My thoughts kept circling back to him, to the way he made me feel. I tossed and turned, the sheets twisting around me, until finally I gave up and sat up in bed, my head in my hands. What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to deal with this? I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Couldn't admit the way I felt, not even to myself. But the feelings were there, undeniable and all-consuming, and so I started doing something I actually couldn't really do while thinking of my uncle. But I couldn't resist it, and to be honest, doing this while thinking of him excited me even more. But while I was busy, something shocking happened. I was completely lost in my own world when the door to my room swung open. David's voice cut through the silence, and I froze, my heart stopping in my chest. He stood in the doorway, his hand still on the doorknob, his eyes wide as they took in the scene. My face burned as I realized how exposed I was. My hand still under the blanket, my breathing heavy. I scrambled to sit up, pulling the blanket around me, as if that could erase what he'd just seen. "What the hell, Uncle?" I shouted, my voice louder than I intended. "Ever heard of knocking?" I didn't know," he stammered, his face turning red. He looked away, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "Well, clearly, I'm busy," I snapped, though my voice trembled with embarrassment. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "I can see that," he muttered, looking towards my sheets, his tone somewhere between amused and shocked. He glanced back at me, his eyes lingering for a moment before he quickly looked away again. I'll leave you to it, then." He turned to leave, but before he could close the door, I called out, "Wait." I wasn't sure why I said it. Maybe it was the panic, or maybe it was the tension that hung in the air between us. Whatever it was, the word escaped before I could stop it. David paused, his hand on the doorknob, and looked back at me. His expression was unreadable, his face still flushed. I hesitated, my mind racing for something to say, some way to salvage the situation. But the truth was, I didn't want him to leave. Not yet. "I'm sorry," I said. I didn't mean to yell. He gave a small nod, his eyes meeting mine for a moment before darting away again. "It's fine," he said, his voice softer now. "I should have knocked. I just wanted to chat with you for a second." I hesitated, my heart thundering in my chest. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim light from the hallway. His features were soft but unreadable. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard, and despite the chaos in my mind, I nodded. "Sure, don't worry. Come in," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The room felt smaller with him in it, the air charged with something I couldn't name. He crossed the room slowly, sinking into the chair by the window. His gaze flicked to me and then away, as though he was trying to work through something himself. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy and filled with unspoken words. I wanted to ask him why he was here, what was on his mind, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I pulled the blanket tighter around me, waiting for him to speak. "I've been thinking," he said finally, his voice low and measured, "about us, about everything." My stomach flipped at the weight of his words, and I couldn't stop myself from asking, "What do you mean?" He looked at me then, his eyes intense and searching. "I mean how different things feel now between us. I don't know when it started, Alex, but it's there, isn't it?" I didn't know what to say. Of course, I felt it. The tension, the pull, the unspoken connection, but hearing him say it out loud made it all feel more real, more impossible to ignore. "It's complicated," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I don't know how to make sense of it." He nodded, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. "Neither do I," he admitted. but I can't pretend it's not there. The honesty in his voice broke something inside me. I looked away, my hands twisting the fabric of the blanket in my lap. I've tried to push it away, I said quietly, to tell myself it's nothing. But it's not nothing, is it? No, he said, his voice firm. It's not. The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of our words hanging in the air. My mind raced with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. Should I tell him to leave, to walk away, and never bring this up again? But I couldn't. I didn't want to. Instead, I looked up, meeting his gaze. His eyes softened, the intensity giving way to something warmer, something that made my breath catch. He stood slowly, crossing the room until he was standing in front of me. He hesitated as though waiting for permission, and I nodded almost imperceptibly. He sat down beside me on the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. The proximity made my pulse race, and I could feel the warmth of his body, the faint scent of him wrapping around me like a cocoon. He reached out his hand, hovering near mine, and I closed the gap, letting my fingers brush against his. It's wrong, I said, my voice shaking, but it doesn't feel wrong. He exhaled a shaky breath, his fingers tightening around mine. I know, he said, his voice trembling. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly his lips were on mine, soft and tentative, as though he was giving me the chance to pull away. But I didn't. I leaned into the kiss, my hands clutching his shirt as the tension that had been building for weeks finally broke. His hands cradled my face, his touch gentle but firm, and I could feel the restraint in every movement, the way he was holding himself back. It only made me want more. I shifted closer, my body pressing against his, and his arms wrapped around me, pulling me in as though he couldn't bear to let me go. Are you sure? He murmured against my lips, his voice filled with both desire and concern. Yes, I whispered, my voice steady for the first time that night. I've never been more sure. He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I felt myself meld into him. Every thought, every worry, every doubt disappeared, leaving only the two of us in the stillness of the room. His hand slid down my back, his touch igniting a fire that I couldn't contain, and I surrendered to the moment, letting him guide me into a world where nothing else mattered. The kiss deepened, and I felt the world around us dissolve into nothing but him. His touch, his warmth, the way he held me as though I might disappear. David's hands moved carefully, reverently, as though he was exploring uncharted territory. His touch sent shivers racing across my skin, every nerve ending alight with sensation. I pulled back slightly, my breaths coming in shallow gasps, his eyes meeting mine, wide and questioning, as though he was waiting for a sign, a word. Anything to tell him this was okay. I don't know what happens next, he said softly, his voice trembling, but I don't want to stop. I felt a pang in my chest, a mixture of fear and longing. Neither do I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. His hand brushed a strand of hair from my face, lingering against my cheek. We don't have to figure it all out right now, he said. We just need to be honest with each other, no pretending. I nodded, leaning into his touch. Okay. For a moment, we just sat there, the silence between us heavy but not unwelcome. It was as though the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen. I reached for him again, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw, and he closed his eyes, a quiet sigh escaping his lips. You're incredible, he murmured, his voice filled with awe. I don't think I've ever felt like this before. I smiled faintly, my heart swelling at his words. Me neither. He shifted closer, his arms circling my waist as he pulled me into a tender embrace. The closeness was intoxicating, the warmth of his body against mine sending a thrill through me. His lips found mine again. This time the kiss was slow and deliberate, every movement filled with unspoken emotion as his hand slid down to my waist. A wave of doubt washed over me momentarily, breaking the spell. Uncle, I said softly, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes. What if this changes everything? He cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing against my cheeks. It already has, he said simply, but I don't think I can go back to pretending nothing's there." His words hung in the air, and I felt my resolve crumbling under the weight of his honesty. He wasn't asking for promises or answers, just the truth, and the truth was that I felt the same. I couldn't go back either, not now. I leaned into him, pressing my forehead against his, then said, "Let's not pretend." The words were like a dam breaking, and in an instant, we were kissing again, our movements growing more urgent. He guided me back against the pillows, his body hovering over mine as his lips trailed from my mouth to my jaw, then down to my neck. My hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, as a soft gasp escaped my lips. Every touch, every kiss felt electric, as though we were discovering something new and forbidden together. The tension that had been simmering between us for weeks finally boiled over, and there was no holding back. "I've thought about this," he admitted between kisses, his voice ragged, "so many times." "Me too," I confessed, my voice trembling with emotion, "more than I want to admit." He paused, looking down at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You don't have to be scared," he said. "I'll stop if you want me to. Just say the word." I shook my head, reaching up to cup his face. "I don't want you to stop," I said firmly. "I want this. I want you." His eyes searched mine for a moment, and then he kissed me again, a soft, lingering kiss that left me breathless. His hands roamed over my body, each touch more confident than the last, and I felt myself surrendering completely to the moment. At one point, he pulled me back. "You're amazing," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. I smiled, my heart swelling at his words. "So are you," I whispered. He chuckled, his fingers brushing lightly against my arm. "This feels right, doesn't it?" I nodded, my eyes locking with his. "It does." We lay there for what felt like hours, wrapped in each other's arms, the world outside fading away. There was no room for doubt or fear, only the undeniable connection we shared. It was a moment I knew I would never forget, a moment that would change everything. The quiet moments after felt heavier than I anticipated. David lay beside me, his arm draped over my waist, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm as he stared at the ceiling. His fingers idly traced patterns along my skin, each touch sending a faint shiver through me. I hadn't realized how much I needed this, how much I needed him, but as the haze of the moment began to clear, reality crept in. "What now?" I asked softly, my voice breaking the silence. David turned his head toward me, his eyes warm and thoughtful. "What do you mean?" I shrugged slightly, tugging the blanket closer to my chest. "What happens now? We can't just go back to how things were, can we?" He propped himself up on his elbow, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "Do you want to go back?" he asked, his voice steady but low. I hesitated, the question settling heavily between us. Did I? Could I? The truth was I didn't want to. The connection we'd shared was too real, too intense to ignore. But admitting that out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice trembling. "It's not that simple." He nodded, his hand finding mine and giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I know, but whatever happens next, I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." I looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. But all I saw was sincerity, a quiet determination that made my heart ache. He meant it, every word. "David," I started, but the words caught in my throat. How could I possibly articulate everything I was feeling? The guilt, the fear, the overwhelming desire to hold on to him and never let go. "I am scared." He shifted closer, his arm wrapping around me as he pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. "So am I," he admitted, "but I don't regret this. Not for a second." His words sent a wave of relief washing over me, and I let out a shaky breath. "Neither do I." For a while, we just lay there, wrapped in each other's arms. The room filled with a comforting silence. It felt safe, like nothing else mattered as long as we were together. But the weight of what had happened lingered in the back of my mind. A reminder that this moment couldn't last forever. "I think we need to talk," I said eventually, breaking the stillness. David sighed, his fingers tracing absent patterns along my arm. Yeah, we do. I sat up, pulling the blanket around me as I turned to face him. This changes everything, I said. I don't know what this means for us, but I know I can't just pretend it didn't happen. Neither can I, he said, his voice firm, but I also don't want you to feel like you have to figure it all out right now. We can take this one step at a time. One step at a time, I repeated, the words sounding foreign, yet oddly comforting. Okay, he smiled, that soft, boyish grin that had always made me feel safe. Whatever happens, I just want you to be happy. That's all that matters to me. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, and I quickly wiped them away, laughing softly. You're too good. You know that? He chuckled, pulling me into his arms. I think you bring out the best in me. We stayed like that for a while, holding on to each other as though letting go would shatter the fragile peace we'd found. Maybe it would, but in that moment, I chose to believe that we could navigate this, that we could find a way to move forward without losing what we discovered together. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. David was already awake, his arm draped over his forehead as he stared at the ceiling. When he noticed me stirring, he turned to me, his expression soft. "Morning," he said, his voice low and warm. "Morning," I replied, my voice still heavy with sleep. He reached for my hand, lacing his fingers with mine. "Are you okay?" I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yeah, I think so." For a moment, we just lay there, the quiet between us filled with unspoken words. It was a new kind of silence, one that felt less daunting and more hopeful. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't facing it alone. As the day unfolded, we fell into an easy rhythm, navigating the uncharted territory of what we'd become. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of uncertainty, of hesitation, but there was also something undeniably real about it, and that was enough. Later that evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, David reached for my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. "Whatever happens next," he said, his voice steady, "we'll figure it out together." I turned to him, my heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and affection. Together, I agreed, my voice barely above a whisper. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it. Together, we could face whatever came our way. Together, we could find our way forward. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more heartfelt tales, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's continue the conversation. What did you think of Alex and David's journey? Stay tuned for more stories on LGBT Stories. See you in the next video.